There's humans. There's angels. Yes, sometimes they fall, sometimes they try to have sex with them, but they didn't create this new line of Nephilim. Nephilims were there before the fall, and Nephilims were there after the fall. And Nephilims will continue to be around because Nephilim are just fallen people who get judged by God. Here's the next question, going back to Genesis chapter 6, because there's a term that comes up for the first time here called the Nephilim. Then we got to answer the question, who are the Nephilim? So if we establish that there was a time when angels came down, the sons of God, and they came and sexually are trying to unite with women, then what is a Nephilim? All right. Here's the different theories about Nephilim. The first option is to say these are the offsprings of the angels and women. So these are the half kind of divine, half human offsprings. And sometimes the book of Enoch, which is Jewish tradition, they call these Nephilim, they're giants, and they believe that Goliath was a Nephilim. The reason why Goliath was so big because he had angel blood in him. That's the first theory. The second theory is that the Nephilim already existed before the angels had sex with women. Again, the angels having sex with women, by the way, is another one of those correlation things. Jews didn't just believe that. Other cultures talked about an event where the angels came and had sex with women. Again, doesn't prove it's true 100%, but they're all commenting on a similar event. Something happened there. They all talked about how the angelic beings had sex with women and that eventually led to the destruction with the flood. Multiple cultures talk about that. So, who are the Nephilim? The second theory is this. The Nephilim have nothing to do with this event. They were of the men of old, as the passage talks about, and also afterwards, meaning Nephilim were there before. When the angels are having sex with women, event happened, they were also there after. How were the Nephilim there after this event and after the flood? And here's the question. If everybody died in the flood? The problem with the second view is if there are Nephilim and then the flood, how can they be there after? Because Noah and his sons were not Nephilim. Well, let's look a little closer. Is that really true, though? All right. The Hebrew word Nephilim is related to the verb to fall. So, for example, when Cain fell away and Lamech, who was the descendant of Cain, and many other men and women had, quote-unquote, Nephilimed, fallen away. The Nephilim could easily have just been people who were falling away from God or turning away from Him. It had nothing to do with these angelic sexual stuff. Now, the author, Moses, is not saying that that didn't happen. He's saying that did happen. There was some event where angels were having sex with women. But he's saying that has nothing to do with the Nephilim. Because who is he talking to? He's talking to Jewish people who live in a culture that believe, for the most part, there are such things as people who are half divine and half human called Gilgamesh, called giants. And he's demythologizing that to them. Anyways, so what are Nephilims? They're just fallen people. This also will make sense as to why some of Canaan's descendants, who are descendants of Anak, in Numbers chapter 13, were called Nephilim. So Nephilim is not referring to a certain bloodline. It's just referring to people who are what? Fallen people. People that turned away from God. Because Nephal means to fall. These are fallen people. So if you recall Sodom and Gomorrah, they were so sinful that they're destroyed with judgment. This also reminds us of the flood, where God himself had to destroy humanity because of their fallenness. That's the connection Peter and Jude is making. This is how bad humanity has become, that they both needed judgment. When Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, it is logical to assume that many of the descendants of those people who were not living in the area any longer were not destroyed. But the Bible doesn't say that everyone in that area and around were completely destroyed. It doesn't say that. In fact, a lot of times when you see genocide, it doesn't say that there are no living person at all there, because you know that can't be the case because you still see them in later chapters. Judgment doesn't mean complete annihilation, obliteration. It means a big one, but there's still people that survive that. How do we know that? Look at Joshua 15, chapter 15, verse 13. There were descendants living out from the plain, in the plain area of Hebron, who were also the Anakites. The Anakites were there pre-flood. How can they have survived? They got destroyed by the flood. How can they survive? They got destroyed by Sodom, all these things. They're still there. So the Anakites were called the descendants of the Nephilim in the Old Testament. These are the descendants of the Nephilim. But it couldn't have been those who were wiped out by the flood, because there would be no Nephilim after the flood if the Nephilims were there before the flood. Because let's say, for example, you believe that the Nephilim were half angels and half demons. Half angels, half humans. Let's say, right? When does Genesis 6 come up? What happened after? The flood. So whether there's some superhuman giants is irrelevant because they all would have been killed by the flood. So how can Goliath be, right? How can Goliath be a Nephilim who was a giant? Do you see that logic? So what is the logic? It's not referring to this. It's referring to the fact that there's always been a line of people who are fallen, who rebelled. And every time there's judgment, it didn't mean that they were all completely destroyed. It means that there's always a remnant of Nephilims or the Anakites, who were much like the Canaanites who survived later on. So it makes more sense that the relatives of, or the descendants from Sodom and Gomorrah and the other areas, the suburbs, so to speak, and those who died in the flood and their descendants, they are the ones in history to fall so far away from God, Nephilim. That's why God had to judge them. So it makes sense why these two groups would both be called Nephilim in this view. So in other words, Nephilim are just regular humans who are fallen and were judged throughout Old Testament history. In other words, there's no such thing as giant humans who are half angels. This, by the way, is the belief of all the other cultures during Moses' time. Moses is writing Genesis 6 is saying that is not true. Yes, there was a period where angels fell and had sex with women, but there's no such line as these half angels, half humans around today. All the Nephilims you see today are just part of a long line of rebellious people throughout history who've been judged over and over again. There's humans. There's angels. Yes, sometimes they fall, sometimes they try to have sex with them, but they didn't create this new line of Nephilim. Nephilims were there before the fall, and Nephilims were there after the fall. And Nephilims will continue to be around because Nephilim are just fallen people who get judged by God. Why do some people believe there's half angels, half demons? Because there was Jewish commentary like the Book of Enoch that came about from Jewish mythology that did believe Nephilims were giants. So that didn't come from thin air. This came from Jewish mythology. The problem is Enoch and those Jewish writings are not canonized in the Old Testament. They're not inspired. So that's just theories that a lot of these Jewish rabbis had. Moses is demythologizing the Nephilim, and he's trying to say that his version of Genesis 6 and the flood is the correct version, while all the other versions are wrong. Now, what we do see from this event, because of the angels sleeping with women, is that the lifespans got decreased a lot. Right? You do see that in the passage. And this is Moses' way of explaining how patriarchs who were living up to 900 some years, some of them, before the flood, all of a sudden after the flood, a lot of them were not living as long. Because why? God was limiting the angels at that point. No more angel, human, sexual, stopping that. So those who did, you're demons forever, right? That's what Jude thinks. And humans even, no more. You guys are going to live for a while, but not 900 years. Because why? God knew that if he let humans live too long, this is going to happen over and over again. Because what was the indication of their human nature? When you give human nature 900 years, you're going to have them having sex with angels over and over again. And we see God was right, because not even after 900 years, what happened in very few chapters? I want to sleep with those angel men. What does that tell you, the story? Human nature has never changed.